Space launch trajectory countdown net. Pad is clear.
10, 9, 8.
Launch auto sequence
7,
has started.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Go for launch.
Vehicle is supersonic.
Stage separation confirmed. Dragon, separation confirmed. Stage 1 is transonic. Landing legs have deployed. And Falcon 9 has landed.
Good morning. It's Thursday, September 12th, and you are looking at a live view of our Falcon 9 rocket awaiting its 4:52 a.m. Eastern Time launch from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. Welcome to our live launch coverage of AST SpaceMobile's BlueBird 1-5 mission. Today's launch marks SpaceX's 88th mission of 2024 and the 383rd overall mission to date. My name is Soumya Srivastava, and I'm a heat shield engineer here at SpaceX, joining you from Hawthorne, California. We're just about 12 minutes away from launch. Both the vehicle and range are green, and we are on track for an on-time launch at 4:52 a.m. Eastern Time, although we do have a 60% possibility of violation on weather, so we are keeping an eye on that. Today's mission is AST SpaceMobile's first of 5 launches of their BlueBird commercial satellites, which are designed to work like cell towers in space, directly with everyday mobile phones. Today's mission follows AST SpaceMobile's Blue Walker Satellite 3, which launched on a Falcon 9 mission back in 2022. Blue Walker demonstrated satellite direct-to-cell phone calls, data downloads, streaming video, and video calls. AST plans to build a constellation of many satellites, including a next-generation BlueBird that's 3 times larger than the BlueBird satellites launching today, which themselves are about half the size of a volleyball court. Before we meet today's Falcon 9, let's take a minute to learn more about AST SpaceMobile and its BlueBird satellites.
Cellular broadband has transformed our world. It has brought humanity closer together, on the move, and in times of great need. Yet today, 2.6 billion people have no internet access, and more than 5.5 billion cellular subscribers still experience coverage gaps. That's why AST SpaceMobile, a pioneering American satellite company, is on a mission to revolutionize mobile connectivity. We're building the first and only space-based cellular broadband network, one designed to work directly with off-the-shelf smartphones and at 4G and 5G speeds. A new dawn for the mobile web begins with our first 5 commercial satellites called BlueBirds. Here's how AST SpaceMobile's unprecedented mission will work. Our first-generation BlueBird satellites have large, thin arrays made of microns. Each micron has solar cells on one side that power cellular antennas on the other. Together, they form a phased array with an area of nearly 700 square feet. That's just under half the size of a volleyball court, yet each folds up to the size of a large refrigerator. This allows our engineers to tuck all 5 of the satellites inside the top of a rocket or fairing. It takes under 10 minutes for the rocket to accelerate to 17,000 miles per hour and reach a zone called low Earth orbit, or LEO. Hundreds of miles above the planet, each packed-up satellite separates from the rocket. Our team will check all satellite systems before releasing each BlueBird from its container. Next, the microns will start automatically unfolding as an array. Once the array is deployed, 2 steerable antennas will pop out from a central hub called the control sat. A months-long process then begins to bring the satellites into service with industry-leading partners like AT&T, Verizon, and Vodafone, among others. This includes spacing out the 5 BlueBird satellites in LEO to provide optimal coverage. So how will these marvelous machines squash dead zones? The same way phones normally work with cell towers and providers. Let's break it down. In a regular cellular connection, a smartphone attaches to antennas at the top of a tower when the signals are strong enough. At the bottom of the tower, a base station computer interprets those signals like a switchboard operator, connecting the phone to networks like AT&T's and Verizon's and the internet. Each BlueBird array is like squeezing hundreds of cell tower tops together. This allows each satellite to beam hundreds of cells of coverage over hundreds of thousands of square miles as it flies overhead. In the US, BlueBirds will connect directly to unmodified phones using premium low-band cellular spectrum. These signals can pass through foliage, cars, and even buildings. Meanwhile, our gateway antennas on the ground connect the satellite to our partners' networks. It's like combining hundreds of base stations. Our solution makes smartphones function as if they are connected to ordinary cell towers. To provide continuous coverage, we plan to launch many satellites, including a next-generation BlueBird that's 3 times larger. As we build out our constellation, we aim to bring seamless 4G and 5G coverage to the US. Flying additional BlueBirds would help build substantial global coverage, kicking off a bold new era for mobile and human connectivity.
The BlueBird satellites, which are built by AST SpaceMobile in Midland, Texas, seek to help connect the unconnected. Around 2.6 billion people have no internet access, and more than 5.5 billion cellular subscribers still experience coverage gaps. AST SpaceMobile's goal is to provide 4G and 5G cellular broadband coverage to even the most remote of areas, including high-speed downloads, streaming, and video calls. Planned service could also assist first responders and help with disaster recovery. Today's mission is a critical step for AST SpaceMobile as they continue to expand their network and bring communication services to even more people around the world. Now, let's meet Falcon 9. Falcon 9 is a 2-stage rocket developed and manufactured by SpaceX, known for its safe, reliable, and cost-effective access to space. It's also the first and currently the only orbital-class rocket capable of reflight. Starting at the top of the vehicle is the payload fairing, a protective shell that encases the payload being sent to space. Today's fairings will be flying for their 18th and 8th times today and will be recovered by our recovery vessel, Go Cosmos, after launch. That fairing will separate and jettison away from the vehicle, exposing the payload once Falcon 9 reaches space. Here's a photo of the satellites being encapsulated in that fairing just a few days ago. Continuing down the vehicle, we have the second stage. The second stage is powered by a single Merlin vacuum engine, or MVac, which is optimized to perform in the vacuum of space. And below that is the first stage, which contains 8 engines arranged around one center engine, held in place by a structure called the octaweb. Each of these 9 Merlin 1D engines delivers about 190,000 pounds of thrust at sea level, which gives Falcon 9 a combined 1.7 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. The Falcon 9 first stage is also equipped with 4 landing legs that deploy just before landing to allow for vertical touchdown on a drone ship or a landing pad. Let's take a look at today's flight profile. Today, Falcon 9's primary objective is to launch the 5 BlueBird satellites into low Earth orbit. And in order to do that, Falcon 9 will follow a trajectory that takes it southeast over the Atlantic Ocean, climbing vertically before curving downrange in a maneuver we called the gravity turn, where the rocket starts bending its path to race along the Earth's surface. About 1 minute into flight, the rocket will hit max Q, or maximum dynamic pressure, where the vehicle is continuing to gain speed as it passes through the thick lower atmosphere. At about 2 minutes...
Strongback lower has started.
We just heard from on the nets that the strongback is beginning to pull away from the vehicle. We will first actually see the clamp arms opening up, which we see right there, and then the strongback will pull away. So after about 2 minutes, Falcon 9 will arrive at its second major flight milestone, main engine cutoff, or MECO, and immediately following MECO, the first and second stages separate. Following stage separation, the first stage will perform a stage flip maneuver to orient itself for boost back burn, and at about the same time, the MVac engine will light during second engine start, or SES1, on stage 2 to continue carrying the BlueBird satellites to their intended orbit. And a few seconds later, the first stage will execute a roughly 1-minute boost back burn to reverse direction and begin to head home. And about 40 seconds after boostback starts, the payload fairing will separate, exposing the BlueBird satellites to space for the first time. About 2.5 minutes after completing the boostback burn, the first stage will perform an entry burn as it re-enters the atmosphere, slowing down to reduce heat and stress on the vehicle. This is followed about 1 minute later by the landing burn, which will guide the first stage all the way back down to touchdown. Today, we'll be attempting to return the booster to the launch site and touch down at Landing Zone 1, or LZ1, at Cape Canaveral.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
At this point in the countdown, both the first and second stages are nearly fully loaded with 1 million pounds of rocket-grade kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. Both the first and second stage should finish propellant loading about a minute apart from each other, with the first stage finishing up at the T-minus 3 minute mark, which just happened, and the second stage finishing shortly at the T-minus 2 minute mark.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
So we just heard that the second stage is now fully loaded with propellant, and at about T-minus 60 seconds, Falcon 9 will enter startup, and that means that the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers will have taken over the launch countdown. And then just inside of T-minus 2 seconds, we will light the 9 M1D first stage engines for liftoff. Weather is still looking green, and the range is ready to support our T0.
Gas launch closeouts has started.
Our T0 of 4:52 a.m. Eastern time. And with that, we are proceeding into the last few minutes of terminal count.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Just heard that Falcon 9 is now in startup, which means the internal flight computers have taken over for the launch countdown.
LD, go for launch.
And the launch director, or LD, has given the final go for launch. So at T-minus 35 seconds, all systems are go for the launch of Falcon 9.
Vehicle is pitching downrange. Stage 1 propulsion is nominal. Copy alarms.
At T-plus 33 seconds and counting, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Slick 40. After clearing the tower, we tilt or gimbal the engines to initiate a roll maneuver, which you may notice in the Stage 1 camera view. This enables the vehicle's antennas to stay in the best position for communicating with the ground. And in just a few seconds, we'll be throttling down the engines in preparation for max Q, or maximum aerodynamic pressure.
Vehicle is supersonic. Max Q.
And there's max Q. And from this point on, while Falcon 9 is still accelerating to an orbital speed of about 17,500 miles per hour, aerodynamic pressure on Falcon decreases as we approach the vacuum of space.
MVAC chill has started.
Now we have 6 events coming up in quick succession, and we should hear all of these called out by Mission Control, starting with MECO, then stage separation, stage 1 flip, second engine start 1 or SES1, and the first stage boost back burn, and lastly fairing separation. After stage 1 shuts down its engines and separates from the second stage, the booster turns itself around in a flip maneuver to make its way back to land near the launch site. The boost back burn is a controlled engine burn that both slows the booster's forward velocity and then propels it towards its landing site. After boost back, stage 1 will continue to coast in microgravity to the highest point of its flight, called the apogee. It will then begin to descend.
Main engine cut off.
There we just heard MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
Stage separation.
MVAC ignition.
And SES1.
Spec startup.
Great call outs there, and a great view of that MVAC engine lighting up. So after boost back, it will then begin to descend under the acceleration of gravity until it's time to relight the engines for entry burn.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Great call out there for fairing separation. We will be attempting to retrieve these fairing halves once they fall back to Earth with our recovery vessel, Go Cosmos. Coming up next, we will have boost back shutdown, right on time.
Both vehicles are nominal trajectory.
So we're now about T+3 minutes and 48 seconds into today's mission. And our next major mission milestone will be the first stage entry burn, which will take place just past the T+6 minute mark. To start the entry burn, we will relight 3 of the M1D engines, which is really similar to pumping the brakes to slow down the vehicle as it passes back into the Earth's atmosphere. The entry burn helps reduce the heat generated from the friction of the atmosphere and reduces the aerodynamic forces acting on Falcon, which helps maintain controlled flight and prepare for the landing burn. We are about 1 minute and 15 seconds away from the first stage entry burn. The Merlins on the first stage are optimized for sea level, and these achieve about 190,000 pounds of thrust each during ascent and descent. And at liftoff, Falcon 9's first stage has thrust that's greater than 5 747 airplanes at full power. And the MVAC engine that you see burning on your screen has a much wider nozzle, and that one is optimized to 220,500 pounds of thrust in vacuum. That entry burn coming up in about 30 seconds, where Falcon 9 will decelerate by firing its Merlin engines.
Stage 1 entry burn.
You can, great call out there, and you can see
Entry burn shutdown.
The entry burn just completed. But you can see that that the stage 1 is still continuing to move really, really fast, even though it is slowing down. During entry burn, the vehicle is flying through Merlin's exhaust gases, or its plume, which deposits a
Stage
layer
1
of
FTS
soot
is saved.
on the vehicle surface. And that soot comes from the carbon-based fuel that Falcon 9 uses. And with each flight, the soot builds up a little bit more on the outside of the vehicle. We have a landing burn coming up in about 30 seconds from now.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Great call for the landing burn.
Landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And that was the 13th launch and landing for this first stage. And this landing marks SpaceX's 347th recovery of an orbital class rocket, including first stage landings for Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
We have SECO 1 coming up in about
Stage 2 FTS is
15
saved.
seconds from now.
And back shutdown.
Great call out. We just had SECO 1. And we aren't expecting to have ground station coverage for the first 3 deployments today. So we'll be returning around T+1 hour for the final 2 deployments. So we'll see you then.
Good transfer orbit.
rockets, Mars, and you just boggle the mind. And the technology caught up, didn't it?
Welcome back. We're now T plus 44 minutes and 35 seconds into the mission and coming up on SES-2 and SECO-2. In about under a minute, we will have the second ignition of stage 2 for a short 5-second burn. And just about 9 minutes after that, we will have our first payload deploy, which, as a reminder, we do not expect to have ground station coverage for. We'll be back at T plus 1 hour for today's 4th and 5th payload deploys. Again, SES-2 and SECO-2 coming up shortly.
Good orbit insertion.
Great call out there and confirmation of SES-2 and SECO-2. We'll be back at T plus 1 hour for today's 4th and 5th payload deploys. And until then, enjoy some space tunes and we'll see you soon. Hello and welcome back. We're standing by for confirmation of the deploy of the first 3 BlueBird satellites, which were set to deploy during the blackout period. Just to recap today's mission so far, we had an on-time liftoff at 4:52 a.m. Eastern Time, which was followed by a stage separation about 2.5 minutes after launch. And the first stage booster then returned to Earth and successfully landed.
We have numerical TLM to suggest that the first BlueBird, second BlueBird, and third BlueBird have deployed.
Well,
Good copy.
We just heard confirmation.
Looks like video just came in.
Oh, we just heard confirmation of the first 3 BlueBird deployments. And so we are now about T+1 hour and almost 1 minute into today's mission, and we are coming up on the deployment of the 4th BlueBird satellite. That 4th payload deploy should be happening shortly. Continuing on with the recap, we had the first stage booster, which returned to Earth and successfully landed at LZ1 about 7.5 minutes after takeoff. And we also had 2 successful ignitions and shutdowns of our second stage MVAC engine. And we are coming up on the 4th payload deploy. We have an awesome view of that 4th BlueBird satellite deploying. We'll now head into a short coast and be back for our final deployment about 3 minutes from now.
We have numerical TLM to indicate that the 4th BlueBird has been deployed.
Hello and welcome back. We are now about T+1 hour and 7 minutes into today's mission, and coming up next we have deployment of the 5th and final BlueBird satellite. We had a really great view of the 4th payload deployment, and we should be having a similarly awesome view of the 5th payload deploying shortly.
BlueBird 5 deployed.
And there you saw on your screen successful deployment of the 5th BlueBird payload. And with that confirmation, we will bring today's webcast to a close. Today's mission marked SpaceX's 383rd overall mission to date and 88th mission of this year. We want to thank the AST SpaceMobile for entrusting us with today's mission and all of you for joining us this morning. If you're interested in more launch coverage, right now the Polaris Dawn EVA is in progress, which is the first ever spacewalk from Dragon. For that and more, check out spacex.com/launches. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon.